Powerful man goes back on election promise to punish pariah nations. That powerful man is Joe Biden, and that nation was Saudi Arabia. And guess what's going on now? Hello there, you 5.6 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage instead of staying in turgid denial, living spellbound and hypnotised by the systems of idiocracy that govern and dominate our lives. Well done. Well done for waking up and not accepting the spoon-fed gruel that they offer you. Hey, I'm doing this brilliant live event on the 10th of July with Wim Hof and Vandana Shiva. There's a link in the description if you want tickets. Any money we make, we will give to the Stay Free Foundation. That's the organisation that I run that makes grants to treatment centres and stuff like that. Anyway, that's not why you called. You came here to be informed, and I will inform you. You know Joe Biden. Old guy, sweet as a nut. Well, when he was being elected, he said, we will punish pariah nations. We're not going to take all this crap from Saudi Arabia no more. Well, guess what's happening now? President Biden, who is a candidate, vowed to make Saudi Arabia a pariah in response to the assassination of a prominent dissident, has decided to travel to Riyadh to rebuild relations with the oil-rich kingdom at a time when he's seeking to lower gas prices at home and isolate Russia abroad. When I make someone a pariah, I don't go to their house and try and do business deals with them. You're meant to ignore them. That's what a pariah means, isn't it? It means that they're untouchable, that you can't negotiate with them. So what that shows you is that Joe Biden said certain things when he was waiting to be elected. Remember how different he was from Trump and all that kind of stuff. And then in office does things differently. You might say, oh, well, but things change, you know, Russia, oil, complexity. Yeah, that's true. But as the brilliant Matt Stoller pointed out on Breaking Points and on Under the Skin when he came on our podcast, the trade between Russia and the United States in geopolitical terms is negligible. And many people might argue that all the price hike stuff and Putin price hike rhetoric is a way to mask escalating profits in certain financial and commercial sectors and to create a convenient scapegoat to prevent what's always happening, a wealth transfer, the manipulation of ordinary people. In addition, President Biden has signed an order authorising the military to once again deploy hundreds of special operations forces inside Somalia, largely reversing the decision by President Donald J. Trump to withdraw nearly all 700 ground troops who had been stationed there. The move stands in contrast to his decision last year to pull American forces from Afghanistan, saying it was time to end the forever war. Sometimes I wonder what the value of these promises is if you do the exact opposite of what's promised. Tell you what we're going to do, we're going to punish Saudi Arabia. How? We're going to go there and beg them to do us a deal on oil. Okay. And another promise is that there's not going to be no forever wars. How? We're going to send some troops to Somalia. Whoa, you understand politics a lot better than me, because for me that sounds like hypocrisy and lies, so I must be stupid. Anyway, how do we know that bloody alt-right conspiracy theorist media haven't all just made this stuff up about lovely old cuddly old Joe Biden? He probably never even made those pledges.
Mr. Vice President, the CIA has concluded that the leader of Saudi Arabia directed the murder of U.S.-based journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The State Department also says the Saudi government is responsible for executing nonviolent offenders and for torture. President Trump has not punished senior Saudi leaders. Would you?
Yes.
Yes. Right. Okay. So what did you mean? No.
And I said it at the time. Khashoggi was, in fact, murdered and dismembered.
Adding the detail of that he was dismembered, that's an actual human being with surviving relatives. Sorry for laughing. Not laughing at the murder and dismemberment of Khashoggi there. I'm laughing at the barefaced audacity of someone that would make these pledges while campaigning and then once in office capitulate into the bland rhetoric, deception and obvious profiteering and manipulation that we've come to associate with the office of presidency. How do people get so jazzed up about the paraphernalia of democracy being desecrated when it seems to me there is nothing to desecrate? Think of all the outrage, and you might agree with the outrage around what happened on January 6th. Perhaps you think that there is a sacrosanct element to the Capitol building and the paraphernalia of democracy. But if there is, it should come from truth, honesty, reliability, the President of the United States being a representative of the people. If none of those things are true, then how is that space sacrosanct? Of course it's not right to threaten violence against anybody. That should be obvious to anyone. But the values of truth, honesty and following through on pledges are the kind of things that are non-negotiable. If you don't follow through on those kind of things, then you are no longer allowed the platform, the promontory of office that entitles you to act like you're like a real dude.
And I believe in the order of the Crown Prince. And I would make it very clear we were not going to, in fact, sell more weapons to them.
This just in, the US State Department has approved Washington's latest raft of proposed weapons sales to the Middle East with Saudi Arabia. So, I don't know, how true was that then?
We were going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are. There's very little social redeeming value in the present government in Saudi Arabia.
But there is a lot of oil, so that's why I'm popping over there to get us a deal on that oil.
And I would also, as pointed out, I would end the subsidies that we have, end the sale of material to the Saudis, who they're going in and murdering children and they're murdering innocent people.
Have you noticed that pre and post presidency, there is this astonishing degree of authenticity? Before people are presidents, it's disgusting what Saudi Arabia are doing. They should be punished. We're going to take them to task. And then often after they're a president, we've got to behave with more dignity, more integrity. It's just that bit when they're actually president that you can't trust them or rely on them at all. Isn't that weird?
And so they have to be held accountable.
Got to hold them accountable. Now I can see why people were so jazzed up and enthusiastic about Joe Biden becoming president. They believed the things that he said. Some of us didn't believe it, because some of us have been watching what happens when people are coming up to becoming a president or a leader of whatever country, and then what happens when they are the leader. Here's something I've noticed as a trend. They don't do fuck all worth doing. They don't represent the will of ordinary people. They represent corporate interests and a globalist agenda. That's just something I've noticed. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen similar themes developing. This is the great Caitlin Johnston from her Substack. You should subscribe to that. In a major walkback from his campaign pledge to make Saudi Arabia a pariah for human rights abuses like the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, President Biden will reportedly visit Riyadh with the goal of persuading Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to help the US alliance to win its economic war against Russia. I've said I'm going to make it a pariah. What are you going to do? Visit them and become their allies. Whoa! The Guardian tells us the trip suggests Biden has prioritised his need to bring oil prices down and thereby punish Russia for its invasion of Ukraine over his stand on human rights. What kind of stand on human rights was it? Saying something? That's what politics has become. I'm going to say some things. Oh, great. Are you going to do some things? Yes. Are they going to relate to the things you said? Only in that they're the opposite of them. So in order to punish Vladimir Putin for his war crimes and his assault on freedom and democracy, Biden will be courting a tyrannical war criminal whose country has no freedom or democracy. Washington will be ending its brief diplomatic dry spell with a government that has been waging a horrific war against Yemen while suppressing any semblance of human rights at home in order to more effectively punish Putin for waging a horrific war against Ukraine, which we're told threatens freedom and democracy throughout the Western world. A lot of people talk about the hypocrisy of the US empire, as though being hypocritical is the issue. But the complete lack of moral consistency in US imperial behaviour is noteworthy, not merely because of hypocrisy, it's noteworthy because it shows the US empire has no morality. I suppose that's something that we continually talk about on this channel. You're always presented a kind of moral solution. Think about the pandemic. The sacredness of human life is presented as the reason for mandating medicines, for draconian lockdowns, yet elsewhere you do not see human life treated as sacred. The war against Russia is presented as a moral crusade because of their unethical imperialist behaviour against Ukraine, and that's an argument that's difficult to contest. But if their values are not consistent, then you have to question, well, is that the reason? You do have to question it. If you don't question it, it's a bit like blindly accepting information just because it's convenient to not have to think too much. Despite the astonishing deluge of propaganda and brazen government disinformation, we're being blasted in the face with painting the war in Ukraine as a fight between good versus evil, freedom versus tyranny, democracy versus autocracy. The truth is much less flattering to the imperial ego. In reality, the US is waging a proxy war in Ukraine for the exact same reason it remains close with Saudi Arabia, because it advances its own interests to do so. Caitlin Johnston, very willing to plainly state an opposing opinion to the globalist US imperial narrative. I suppose that Caitlin is not saying, and I certainly wouldn't say, that Putin and Russia's interests are anything other than malign. But that doesn't mean that you don't question the United States. The problem I have with many liberal thinkers, and broadly speaking what could be considered the progressive argument when it comes to the issue of this war, is a willingness to turn a blind eye to previous American conduct in foreign wars in order to somehow support this action. And it reminds me of the willingness to turn a blind eye to the previous actions of Big Pharma in order to support the actions undertaken in the pandemic. I am no supporter of conspiracy. I'm simply inviting you to participate with me in a critical understanding of how power is operating. I don't know what the answers are. I'm just saying that we have no choice but to approach these things with a degree of maturity and a willingness to not just shut down avenues of discourse, discussion and analysis because it's uncomfortable. We cannot be like children who just want there to be a goodie and a baddie and want mummy and daddy to take care of it, so we're not willing to look at the brutal reality, the complex reality, the dishonest, hypocritical, contradictory reality. How can we have autonomy? How can we have freedom if we're willing to behave as children in social and political issues? A lot of commentators like to say the US government's intimacy with Saudi Arabia undermines American values, but that's not true at all. The US isn't undermining its values by cozying up with Saudi Arabia. It is perfectly honouring and representing its values. One only believes the US is undermining its values by partnering with Saudi Arabia if one assumes that US values include freedom, democracy, justice and peace. This is not an acceptable thing for a grown adult to believe in 2022. US values in the real world are domination and global power. That's it. Really, if you think about it, Saudi Arabia is just a more honest version of the United States. Its tyranny is right out in the open instead of being sneakily disguised under inverted totalitarianism. Its oligarchs and its official government are all the same people. It never tries to pretend its wars are humanitarian in nature. And when it wants to murder an inconvenient journalist, it simply does so, instead of dishonestly framing it as an espionage case. That's a very confronting piece of writing, and it invites me even to try and get beyond my own programming, because I'll let you into a secret. I like America. I like the American flag. I like the Dukes of Hazzard. I like Jimi Hendrix. I like Muhammad Ali. I like a lot of American things, hamburgers, Coca-Cola, all these things. And when it comes to my own country of colonialism and imperialism, I like the Queen. I like the Beatles. Let's forget for a minute that some of the things I listed there are very anti-establishment figures and working class heroes and proud black nationalist Muslims in some cases. The fact is we've all been indoctrinated and trained to love our captors. Unless we are willing to look at our own conditioning, how it affects us as individuals, you have to ask yourself, how did these beliefs get inside my head? How did that get in there? Why do these values appeal to me? Is it universal, or is it possible that I've been coached and conditioned into an ultimately passive mindset and that I'm unable now to correctly assess the actions of America unless someone says to me, well, look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has done this, America has done this. Now, as a person that's part of the same systems of dominance that I imagine the majority of you are, I still feel like, no, America, the Simpsons, I love America. But, you know, Julian Assange versus Jamal Khashoggi, I don't know, man. What do you think? Is that what we should be aspiring to? Is what we're aspiring to is we're not as bad as really bad things? Is that the aspiration? If it is, well done, we can all go home, just let the mainstream media get on with their job. But if you think you can actually create a beautiful world, a better world than this one, then we've got to be grown-ups. In truth, when you look at its overall behaviour on the world stage, the US is far more murderous and tyrannical than either Russia or Saudi Arabia. Pretending that Biden is lowering the United States beneath its values by visiting Saudi Arabia is highly flattering to the US, if anything. It's the other way round. So there we are. Not only are we being confronted with the idea that Biden made campaign pledges that he simply has not fulfilled, not only hasn't fulfilled, but has inverted, done the exact opposite of. Not only are we confronted, particularly those of us that have previously believed in liberal, democratic parties, centrist, leftist, sellout parties, that, well, look, how is this better than Trump? How? Tell me how. What is it you like better? Let's break this stuff down. Not only that, how is it better than Saudi Arabia? By degree. Now, of course, if you're asking me outright, where would I rather live? England or Saudi Arabia? England! I'm English! But that's not the end of the argument. Don't allow people to use that to shut down the discourse, to shut down your aspiration, to shut down your dissent, your criticism. You're entitled to have a voice. You're entitled to expect better. But the cost of that entitlement is a willingness to sacrifice, to let go of our little baby beliefs that we just want to be McDonalded and Coca-Cola'd into passive obedience. We have to be willing to awaken. And awakening can be painful. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Your views encourage and educate us. We need you to comment on this story. Give us a thumbs up, share it around. If you don't subscribe yet, subscribe now. Remember, I'm doing that event on July 10th. You can come if you want. There's a link in the description. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these ones. Sign up to my mailing list and stay free.